Dear friends, do you have a deep love for the earth and want to learn how to bring the energy of mindfulness to your climate response? Well, we've put together an online course called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. It is a 7-week online learning journey where we will learn how to nurture insight, compassion, community, and mindful action in service of the earth. The course harnesses the wisdom of our teacher Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh and includes new Dharma talks and practices, community sharing groups, and live interactive events with monastic teachers. I'm looking forward to teaching at these live events together with Sister True Dedication, as well as many other monastic Dharma teacher and lay teachers. We begin on the 20th October 2024 and learn together for 7 weeks until our closing event on the 8th of December. And following the course, you'll still be able to access all the talks and practices for 1 whole year. Join us by heading to the website today, plumvillage.org/ZASP. That's ZASP. Hope to see you there.
Dear friends, welcome to this latest episode in the podcast series, The Way Out is In. I am Jo Confino, working at the intersection of personal transformation and systems evolution.
And I'm Brother Phap Huu, a Zen Buddhist monk, a student of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh in the Plum Village tradition.
And today, dear listeners, we have a special guest. We have Kate Raworth, who was the creator of something called Doughnut Economics, which is a way of helping us to reimagine economics for the 21st century, where we respect planetary boundaries and also learn how to create a fair and equal world within that. And very similar to, in a sense, this podcast, which is about taking the teachings and applying them into the real world. Kate also helped found the Action Lab, which is a way of taking the theories of economics and showing how they can work in practice.
The way out is in.
Hello everyone, I am Jo Confino.
And I'm Brother Phap Huu.
And as I mentioned, we are sitting in Thich Nhat Hanh's hut, the Sitting Still hut in Upper Hamlet in the southwest of France, in Plum Village, with Kate Raworth, the creator of Doughnut Economics. Kate, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's really, really wonderful to be in here with you.
Great. And so Kate came to Plum Village last year as part of a Climate Leaders Retreat and has now returned with her husband and her 2 kids for the family retreat. So obviously something must have attracted you. But Kate, before we get into things, not everyone in the world has heard of Doughnut Economics. I mean, they should have done, but they maybe haven't. So do you want to just give for people, just to give a context to our conversation so they understand what actually is it and what are you seeking to do by creating it?
Okay. So Doughnut Economics is one way of trying to create an economics that actually is based on this planet, lives on Earth. Economics, when you go back to the ancient Greek, literally means the art of household management. So how are we going to manage our planetary shared household in the interest of her inhabitants? What an amazing, noble quest to be part of. But the economics I was taught at university did not take me, or I believe my entire generation, all of us, towards that path. So Doughnut Economics is an offering of a transformative way of thinking about it. And the donut, you've got to say, why is it called Doughnut Economics? Think of a donut, the American kind with a hole in the middle. If we think of humanity's use and engagement with Earth's resources radiating out from the center of that circle, then the hole in the middle is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. It's where people do not have the resources each one needs for food and water, health, shelter, housing, education, communication, community. So we want to leave nobody in the hole in the middle of the donut. But as we collectively, as humanity, use and draw on Earth's resources, there's a real danger that we not only get people out of the hole and into the donut itself, but we start to push at the outer limits, at the outer circle. And that's where we risk, indeed we are, pushing well over planetary boundaries, the life-supporting systems that make life work on this planet, that give us a stable climate and fertile soils and healthy oceans and abundant biodiversity and a protective ozone layer overhead. So in the simplest of language, we want to leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's limits. We want to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. And that's the goal of getting into the donut. Can we live in the donut? And then the economics is, well, if that was your goal, what kind of economic mindset would you bring to this? What would you be teaching students in their first lecture of economics? How would you begin? So for me, that's the question of how should we think like 21st century economists. And so I wrote a book whose subtitle is Doughnut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And it's very much ways of thinking. It's not what to do, right? It's not packed with policies. It's how to think. Things like, well, the goal is to thrive in the donut, not to grow endlessly. Let's re-understand who we are as people. Let's nurture human nature, not assume we are selfish, rational, independent individuals. Let's recognize that the economy is made of complex systems. It can't be reduced to mechanical interventions. We need to create economies that are distributive by design, that share resources with all, that are regenerative by design, that regenerate the living systems, and that go beyond growth. So that's the essence of Doughnut Economics.
Beautiful. Phap Huu, this sounds very much like Buddhism to me and the Plum Village teachings, which is something that's relevant to Earth right now, something that understands interbeing in terms of actually we can't look at ourselves alone. We have to see ourselves in the context of all of life. And it talks also about consumption, about how we consume differently. And it talks about fairness and about generosity. So does that sound very much like this is what we're doing here as well?
Definitely. It's something that as a practitioner of all ages, when I was listening to Kate, the word moderation became very alive in my consciousness. And we recite the 5 contemplations at least once a day in our eating meditation. And the third one is our practice to transform negative habit energy, especially the greed that is alive in all of us, and learn to consume with moderation. And this wisdom comes from generations ago. And in this present moment where I feel like not only economics, but also the way of why we go in the direction of deep consumerism is because of not feeling enough in oneself, and having also about the donut, we also have a hole, we have a void inside of us, and that void is suffering, and the void is pain. And when we are avoiding pain and when we are avoiding suffering, we seek material resources to make us feel better for ourselves, and to feel also superior. And I think this is also at one of the core of transformation in the path of Buddhism, which is to come back to oneself and to understand that we are enough, and to rebuild our understanding and our connection to Mother Earth and to ourself. And this collective consciousness that we have, we make this collective consciousness of consuming also, if we look at it, can also give us the insight that as a collective, we can also transform this understanding and this habit energy. So what Kate was sharing, like, yes, this is also, as spiritual practitioners or Buddhism, at our core is to help come back to our understanding of moderation as well as interbeing, connectedness.
Beautiful. So, Brother Phap Huu, we should write a book called Doughnut Spirit,
Part two to Kate's.
which is when we suffer, then we tend to overshoot to
Yes.
compensate for that. So we've got another donut in the shop.
And I just want to say, I love it's a donut because, you know, in North America, when you feel empty, you go and eat a donut.
Yeah. And it's almost the ultimate consumerist food. So there's a deep irony, right? That it's cool. I'm very aware of this.
It makes it more beautiful.
Well, and I'll tell you what, it does make it more accessible for people who are intimidated by economics.
Yeah.
Right? Most people, when I was writing my book back in 2014, 15, and I'd meet parents at the school gate, pick up time for the kids, and they say, oh, what are you doing? So I'm writing a book about rethinking economics. And most people immediately draw back. And then they say, oh, I wasn't very good at maths at school, which tells you a lot about it's intimidating, it's complicated, it's mathematical. And I would say, well, actually, the only numbers in my book are the page numbers. So we can all do this. So calling it Doughnut Economics, people are like, hang on, that's silly, it's playful, it's therefore not intimidating, and it means everybody feels that they can approach the conversation. But I mean, I of course I feel slightly ridiculous sitting here with you in Thai's hut in the heart of the Plum Village tradition talking about donuts, because they are the ultimate sugar fried, right? So there's a playful twist there. From what you just shared, I want to say so many things. Last night at dinner, so we were having dinner in the Dharma sharing family, so a group of about 12 people sitting together. We were introduced to each other at the beginning of the week, and you build a really strong connection. I'd love to come back and talk about that. And I was asked by the sister who's holding our space to read the five, what are they called?
Contemplations.
The Five Contemplations. And it was a really big thing for me. I really believe in speech acts. I really believe in the power of speaking, which is why people say their vows, whether it's becoming a monk or becoming married, where we speak, right? It's really powerful, and you see it here. Tears pull down people's faces as they say things that are so deeply true to them. So it felt very powerful for me to read, you know, I don't recall the exact words, but the spirit is, this food that we're about to eat is made of the whole universe, of all of the earth and the stars from the sun, and this seeing the world in your plate, I find so beautiful that you just look at the food you're about to eat and ask, where does this food come from? What has contributed to this food? Many human hands, but the soil and all the bacteria in the soil and the sunshine and therefore the stars and therefore the Milky Way. It's cosmological what's in your plate. So it was a real privilege. And at the end of it, the last one ends saying, so that we are eating in a way that we can reduce and help stop climate change, but also that we are in service to all living beings. And for me, as I work on what's called Doughnut Economics, of course it keeps evolving, right? My book came out in 2017, but it has to be a living journey. You don't want to be stuck holding a line, a text. So you're evolving as Plum Village is evolving. And I'm more and more moving into thinking about in service of all living beings and going beyond what the donut stands for. Well, I'd love to talk more about this.
So if you'd love to talk more about it, why don't we talk more about it? There's a revolutionary act, isn't it? The great thing is we have no schedule here.
Great.
We haven't planned what we're going to say. So what does that mean to you? Because one of the deep teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh is to go beyond the human, the more than human, on the fact that interbeing is that we're connected to all of life and all of life is in us.
Yeah.
And we are made of non-human elements. In other words, we're made of the sunshine and we're made of the rain and we're made of the soil and we're made of the food we grow and all that. So what does that mean to you to go beyond this idea of, the planet just being a boundary, in a sense, just being something we have to stay within, as opposed to actually it's as important as us? And what is the donut for the earth?
Yep. I'm going to step back slightly from that question and just, I want the metaphor, and I find metaphors really useful, knowing that they're just metaphors. Imagine a wide valley that we want to span, we want to cross. And most people just could not jump right across this valley. It's too far. And the valley is like mindsets. So on the one side of this valley, on one hillside, is Western economic education, which most people who are touched by Western society and Western mindset, which, by the way, is a lot of the world, and it's not just people who are taught economics, right? We all pick it up because we read it in the way our politicians talk, in the way journalists write about the economy. So we're all actually caught in it. That mindset focuses on valuing, it focuses on markets. It starts with supply and demand. It puts a price on the individual item. It says there are externalities. There may be things we haven't to take. No, you're right. It somehow deeply knows about interbeing because it says there are things here, but there are externalities. They're outside of the price contract. It focuses on success as growth. It names humans as rational economic man, the individual, competitive, self-interested single person. So we are raised on that hill and taught that mindset and taught if you want to do well in the world of business, this is the mindset to equip you. Now, way across on the other side of the valley is Plum Village. and is Buddhist tradition and many other traditions. And I recently been in wonderful conversations with a Hawaiian indigenous scholar called Kamana Bima. So Hawaiian tradition, many indigenous traditions that the Buddhist tradition calls it interbeing. Others will call it by other names, but that interaction, interdependency, and reverence for all life. So these are really far apart. And what I've only come to realize more recently is I think Doughnut Economics, it's not the same. I mean, it's clearly not the same as, but it's like we've built a bridge that has a foot in the middle of the valley because we can't jump all the way across. So I think of Doughnut Economics and what I'm seeing it serve for some people who are raised like I was in the Western economic mindset. It is a staging post that I can jump to. It's an adjacent possible. I can get to there. Oh, the idea that we could meet the human rights of all people. I know about human rights. We put the rights of all people at the center, leave no one in the hole. And then planetary boundaries, this very powerful scientific concept coming from Western science saying there are life-supporting systems of the planet. There are 9 of them. We must stay within these boundaries. One of them is biodiversity loss, right? Let's not lose too much biodiversity. It makes sense. We can get there from our Western mindset to this point. What I'm now enjoying seeing in people, others who've said, I love Doughnut Economics, and also myself, is now that I'm halfway, I can see much further from here. And now I can see there's a beyond. And I can see there's interbeing. I can see the Hawaiian cosmology. I can see other indigenous cosmologies. I can see a biocentrism that would never have been possible for me if I had just tried to jump there from supply and demand. So I think of Doughnut Economics as one of the feet of a bridge that stand across a long valley and help people cross over. It's like the way I often describe it, a Western mindset recovery program. I'm playful here, but right, it's a mindset recovery. But I've been really touched, honored that some people who are raised and inhabiting much deeper philosophies and indigenous philosophies, like my friend Kamana Bima from Hawaii, and I feel in this opportunity here in Plum Village or in Bhutan, saying, of everything we've seen from Western economics, Doughnut Economics actually makes sense to us, right? So reaching back across this bridge from the other direction. And maybe we can connect here, use it as a connecting point, or speak to the Western mindset through this. So it's a really interesting place to be, that I feel a huge value in holding that space, even though I can see a great value in going beyond it. And I'm personally actually torn. Should I hold this space hold the donut, even though I can see it's still boundaries, right? It's still, and it expresses all other living beings as a planetary boundary of biodiversity loss. What if we were to invite them into the center of the circle and say, all living beings, how do we live well together. So that for me is the place. And there's last thing I'll say here is I've been teaching this idea I drew it 12 years ago, and I've been teaching a decade long of students coming through universities. And 12 years ago it was, well, that's a bit radical. I mean, that's, come on, that you're pushing the edge of the envelope here. Now students arrive and they say, yeah, of course. I mean, just go beyond though. Why this is very anthropocentric. And so there's this beautiful graduation in the mindset of people arriving saying, well, of course, and I'm going to leap beyond. And I say, please leap beyond. So my favorite activity to invite my students is when I introduce the donut, I say, okay, and now let's constructively critique it. Let's evolve it. Let's move it forward, because let's not get fixed in place. Let's keep moving beyond.
So, Brother Phap Huu, I want to bring you in here because so much of what Kate is saying for me resonates with Thich Nhat Hanh's approach, which is that he also, he studied all the great sort of Buddhist texts, but the way he allowed people to cross the valley from an existing thinking to that place was through the use of metaphors, through very simple, practical tools, never to talk in an esoteric way, but also always to make it very grounded. So do you want to talk a little bit about how Plum Village, and also Kate talks about the evolution, that, this is one of the great strengths of Plum Village, is that nothing is fixed. That Thai said, we're always, so Thai is how Thich Nhat Hanh was called, Thai teacher, how that evolved, how Buddhism was evolving, it had to be relevant to this generation. And Kate's talking about actually now this generation has changed and she needs to evolve. So there seems to be so much that we can talk about in that.
Yesterday when we had picnic lunch together in New Hamlet, Lily had a book.
Lily Cole
had a book called The Raft is Not the Shore.
Yeah.
So I feel like what you just explained, like the two valleys and the teachings and the views and the graduations of understanding, we're creating a lot of rafts to help bring the big gap of understanding and connection. And I think what I love what you were able to acknowledge, because if you were to write it now, it would be very different.
Yes.
Because your understanding has evolved and has grown, because your interbeing has also is blossoming. And I love this. And this is why our teacher and Plum Village is what it is today, is because our teacher had this insight that the teachings should always be alive, and the valley of suffering has many waves, has many currents, and a skillful teacher or a skillful person who has understanding, when they put the raft together, when they start building the raft, they can't build it with just the idea of themselves. They have to touch the suffering of the community, of the present moment, in order to find the right tools and the right materials so that it can sail the current of today. And so how this insight helps us is the insight of never being caught. Even as we are sailing and the raft becomes heavier, we should reevaluate the raft. We should look again at the raft and understand, is it still a supportive understanding to help us reach the other shore? And even as we reach the other shore, in Buddhism, we speak of bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas are the ones who, their love is so big and they want everybody to reach the other shore. So even if we reach the other shore, we're ready to go back on the raft and go back to the other shore and bring more people over. And in a way, this is also interbeing in spirituality. We call it deep Buddhism. When we have deep understanding, we're also not selfish. We're not okay with just us understanding and touching happiness or having touch enlightenment. We want all humans to have a way out of suffering. And to even go beyond, we say we want all beings to be enlightened. So our great vow is to sail, keep sailing the raft to bring passengers over and over, and it's not limited to human beings, because in also interbeing, when we are sailing this raft together, our understanding expands to animals, plants, and minerals, and to all beings, and also understanding that we cannot be alone. And so I think that when we, as a practitioner and as educators and as change maker, how Thai has continued to stay young and continue to stay energetic and enthusiastic in it is always asking, how can I renew the raft? And I think this is where he has so much joy, and his curiosity keeps his um, teaching and his insights evolving and new. So the practice of beginning anew is not just within relationship, but beginning anew also in the understanding of happiness, suffering, and change. Also economics, like when we think of, I love how you brought back, like, it's how are we taking care of our home. And this, like what I imagine, like in education, like in the first year or two, like to teach the children the understanding of where the food comes from. And we have a happy farm in Plum Village, and all the children have an opportunity to go and, you know, be in touch with the farmers, see where their French fries come from, potatoes, see where the ketchup come from, actual tomatoes. And is this is interbeing in action, right? And it's not in theories, it's not in books. And also to understand the relationship of gratitude. I think gratitude now is very much, it's more of a distant thing, but the gratitude that we're practicing as a practitioner is in every moment. Like the gratitude to have food in front of our table, to know that this is not simple, this is a gift. The whole cosmos has come here to offer us this piece of bread, this tomato, etc. And then it's not simple to be together with loving human beings and not to also take this for granted. And also then to see the interbeing of this moment. Like in this retreat, in this summer retreat, whenever I see a child, and I may get irritated, I may get annoyed, like of the noise that they're making, like in our dining hall, is like sometimes the peak of the noise is like it wants to blow up the roof, right? And I'm like, breathing in, breathing out. But then there's a deeper level of seeing, is that, but how the environment of feeling safe in this place, physically safe, emotionally safe, spiritually safe, is much higher than my judgmental mind of like, this is too noisy. But for them to be in a community where there is understanding, there's embrace, of course there's boundaries also, but there is safety. So like all of this becomes, for me, then becomes like, I see it as the raft that we're helping people have a deeper understanding than the other rafts that are being presented outside, which, it's a lot about success and a lot about money, like about the dollar signs, right? Like whenever we read a post, we see a sign about the stock market and so on, like what that does to us emotionally. And then when people read the news about climate change and seeing the disaster, the fire, for those who have a spiritual dimension and or those who have a love towards beyond humans, they get impacted very differently. But I feel like that impact is not the same impact of when you see dollar signs and how that becomes your own safety and comfort.
One touches the mind and one touches the heart. So, Kate, a couple of things Phap Huu mentioned in where we got to so far is about touching our suffering, and also he's talked about rafts and that. And I know you and I sort of looked at each other with a bit of a smile because we met for the first time, I think, probably about 8 years ago.
8 years ago?
8 years ago. And we met on a small Swedish island with the Club of Rome, which is an organisation that was looking at new economics and how to renew our way of thinking and acting in the world. And you were in pain at that time.
I really was.
And we then sat on the plane on the way back from Sweden to the UK. And what I love about Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings is that the older I get, the more I see how they have, like a cup of tea, like putting a tea bag in a hot water. They infuse so many people's lives. And actually, I read you. I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Art of Power, and I read you a small section of that, which touched the place of how to let go of the suffering and of the past and be in the present moment and renew ourselves. And then I mentioned to you, I think, something to the effect of you were concerned about, you being a ship sailing off from the harbour, and I said, well, you're one of many boats. It's like a flotilla that we all need to be. We all need to have our boat that goes out, but we're part of a flotilla of boats, or maybe rafts. So do you want to just talk a little bit about just, what it was like? Because this practice is about being in our suffering, recognizing our suffering, and then not being a victim of our suffering. Do you want to just maybe talk a little about that, just that process for you?
Absolutely. So it was 2015, I think. I had left my job at Oxfam, which I'd loved, and I'd worked there for a long time too, because I'd drawn the donut in 2012. And it had this, as an image, it has this resonance, this traction. People had just been drawn to it, and it had sort of kind of flown and taken off. And people started saying, "Oh, you're the donut lady." And you think, what have I done?
It's like, I don't make donuts.
I know, really, I don't eat donuts. What have I done? And I left my job at Oxfam to write a book. Okay, if the donut is the goal, what's the mindset? So I had said, right, I'm going to leave the security of a community of working at Oxfam and a paid job and all that. I'm going to just go freelance. I'm going to take the risk. And by the way, it's a really high risk thing to do, to write a book. I got a £10,000 advance. I mean, I was very, very fortunate. A foundation said, we really support what you're doing. We want to give you a stipend to live off. So, and I just want to say that because that does not happen for most authors, and it's a very vulnerable thing to do. But it's even more intellectually vulnerable because the donut had real resonance. And then I was thinking, the subtitle of the book was 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. And I wrote on Twitter, I'm thinking about this, send me ideas. And people would send me these ideas. I think, is that genius or is that completely crazy? And especially around the concept of growth. Can we have growth or not? I got really tied in knots, and of course it was banging up against all my economics training and I lived in Oxford, which is where I'd gone to university, so I kept bumping into my old professors, and it was sort of am I really losing the plot, or am I finding a path and finding something different? And I was very stuck, and I was invited on a small gathering of people on this beautiful island in Sweden, and I thought this will help me get out of the hole. I'd actually got a list on my desk of all the people I was going to write to tomorrow to say, I'm sorry, what was I thinking, to my agent, to the publisher, to the foundation, to my parents, I can't do this. And I was invited to this island, and I thought, okay, I knew some of the people going, this will kind of kickstart me again, and I'll find the feet again, and it'll be fine. And it didn't. And it was good to be in their company and hear them talk, but I said almost nothing. And then there was this very cheeky and playful person called Jo who was there. I just could tell there was a really open soul here. And we were at the airport, On the way back, a group of people, and the two other people who were there just drifted off. And something in me just made me want to connect with you. And I just said, slightly bizarrely, we're about to get on a flight and go home, I said, I'm not usually like this, by the way. I'm normally more animated or something. I wanted to explain myself. And I got on the plane and there was no one sat next to me and, buckled in and off we're going home. And then when the seatbelt sign came off, I saw Joe 10 rows ahead pop up, and he comes back and he said, I think I meant to come and talk to you because you were reading The Art of Power by Thich Nhat Hanh, and you'd opened it, and the page you'd open it, that you'd stuck my business card, I'd obviously given you a card, and you sat down in the empty seat next to me and just essentially gave me the most extraordinary support, listening, coaching, all the way back to London. And what came up was, I think you must have asked me, thinking metaphorically, what is it you're doing? And I said, well, I think of new economic thinking, of a sort of flotilla of boats going out towards a sort of a shared shore, going back to this lovely metaphor you were using, Brother Phap Huu, of the
so
raft.
wonderful that we got this common
brilliant.
Metaphor.
And I want to be part of that flotilla, and some boats are really big and they have engines, and some are tiny and some are rowing, but this flotilla going, and I think my fear, so to go to the fear, is I know the donuts really resonated, and what if this book just doesn't? What if it's a flop? That fear of following something that's been successful and taken up with, and the fear of putting yourself out there, and also not knowing what on earth to write next. And you said, well, why don't you just put your boat in the water and just go with the flotilla. And many, many other things that we discussed. And when I got home, the beautiful thing was my daughter, who was about 8, she'd said, Mommy, I made you a little paper boat. I couldn't believe it. There was this little paper boat waiting. It was like, how does that happen? And also, even in the flight, you got up and went off to the loo, and I picked up this book you were reading. And I'd heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, but I was like, what is this book, The Art of Power? Why is he reading this book? And I opened it randomly at another page, and Ty had written there. He said, for example, I wrote a book that was really successful, and then I was writing another one, and I was afraid. And I was like, I don't believe this. There's just this flirt from the universe, these lovely ideas that just resonate. And when I got home, I said to my partner, I was like this, I met this guy, Joe, who is he, Joe? So Joe who? I said to my partner, Roman, I don't know if I'm going to carry on writing this book, but if I do, that conversation really, really, really helped me turn around. So thank Joe. But yes, rafts, right? And shores. And I wanted to come back to the bridge metaphor. It's like a similar idea. And I just wanted to say, of course, I know that even if I'm saying the donut is like a staging post, a foot in the bridge towards the other valley, of course, when you reach it, what you thought was your other valley, you can see further. The horizon is further. No, this actually isn't the shore. Go further. So I also don't want to position any other person or my views like, that's it. Mm-hmm. Because we're all on a journey, and wherever we arrive, we see actually there's new layers to take off, or further to go.
Beautiful. And I love this conversation because it's so flowing effortlessly. But Phap Huu, let's talk about that, because my experience, a lot of people will have thought of Thich Nhat Hanh, and especially those who maybe didn't know him as an enlightened being, that he'd made it to the other shore, and then he just sort of sat there and sort of spread his understanding and wisdom. But actually, he constantly saw that there was more, and that he was saying, even I could take one of my calligraphies, I could study it for 150 years, and I could go deeper. So actually, it'd be worth talking about where is the other shore? Is there how many shores are there? But more to the point, how do we relax into the no destination? Because so many people, and you mentioned it earlier, Kate, we start off with a goal, and then everything is directed towards the goal, and that becomes very brittle, because either we get to the goal and realize actually that's not the end point, or sometimes we fail to get to that goal and then think, we made a mistake. So how can we see life in a way that that doesn't determine what the shore looks like, but use it as a metaphor for our journey?
In Buddhism, one of the Buddhist teaching is having a volition and aspiration is a nutriment, is an energy to help us keep going. And the Buddha also gives us another antidote, which is aimlessness, which is to help us have an aspiration, but not think that once we've arrived and completed that aspiration, that's when we finally touch happiness. But to understand and to see that the process and the journey that we go through in ripening that aspiration, whether we experience heartbreak, or we experience a lot of support, or we experience doubt, and we start to face challenges, all of that in the spirit of aimlessness is the journey, and at the same time the destination, because you can only arrive and meet those suffering in the present moment, in the difficulties, and then that becomes an ingredient for your shore that you are rolling towards. And then when you have all of this understanding, when you arrive at the shore, whether that shore, for me in this present moment is, for me, I'm just speaking, my shore in this moment is understanding my impact with this community, right? So if I'm to think like 22 years ago when I ordained, my aspiration was just to be a happy monk, because that's what the happiness I received as a kid coming here, that's something I wanted to give back. So my shore was like, okay, I wanted to be a happy monk. And when I arrived and I ordained, first day, I got it. I was so happy. But that's not the end, because we have to keep cultivating the shore, and we have to build a community on this shore. And I think the hard part is, for a lot of the understanding of success is arriving there and we feel we've accomplished, we're finished. But the deeper we're in this journey of life, especially with the insight of interbeing, okay, you've arrived there, now help others and help build a community, help build a path that others can also walk to arrive there. And there are many who chooses to be solo and just feel okay with that. But in the spirit of Plum Village and in the spirit of our teacher, during the war, I always remember he said, like, I'm here to help relieve suffering. And that relieving suffering is not mine alone. It's the community that is around me. But when I relieve suffering outside, the transmission of relieving suffering as a transmitter, but I also get it in return. I also receive back the cessation of suffering by seeing them with hope, by seeing them with a smile. So the shore that we look at from the beginning is just one view. But as we are arriving at the shore and we've on the shore, we know it's not the end, because how do we develop the shore so that it is a refuge for all? That's the hard part. And I think that's not only the hard part, but that is where we have to have a spiritual practice to return back to foundation in order to not lose our aspiration. Because many people have arrived at the shore and the mind of not enough, or the grass is greener on the other side, another shore, we go back and we take another journey. And for some, it's important to take that journey again. And for some, they take a journey, many journeys, and they come back to the original shore that they've already arrived at. So not to be dogmatic with this answer, because I also feel like the Buddha didn't think like one path is the only path, but for the understanding that the Buddha had, which is all of his teaching has only one purpose, and that is the cessation of all suffering, to help everyone touch liberation and freedom. But the Buddha did not say that on the shore there's no suffering. It's how to be free even in our suffering, how to still touch happiness while there are storms and there are misunderstanding. But because we've had the raft, we've had the journey, we can bring that understanding of that raft to meet the journey of being on the shore. So I think here we can evolve. We have one book, Crossing the Shore, and then we have another book, Being on the Shore. And I think Plum Village is a metaphor of Thai's journey. Thai had to cross many shores, the shore of suffering of the country, the North and the South brothers killing each other, and how spirituality became a shore, a bridge to voice the humanity that we can still see in the pain and suffering. Thai brought the light of hope. Thai brought love. Thai brought understanding through his poetry, through his writing, through his social activism with the young community, of just bringing hope and to remind that man is not our enemy. It is ignorance. It is discrimination. It is ideologies. And then he crossed the shore to America to shine some light of suffering, what is really happening. And then that light, that helped light up a deeper understanding. And then he brought the practice of mindfulness in a new way. He's not the origin of mindfulness, but he helped build a new raft that so many people can apply it into their daily life in this century. And then, being exiled, he crossed another shore, which is touching the insight of, I have arrived, I am home. And then building that home so that it becomes a refuge for all walks of life. And I think one of his courage was not to be caught in also the idea of Buddhism. And he continued to expand the shore so that it can embrace all beings and all religion. For example, when you take the 5 mindfulness trainings in a traditional temple, you have to take the 3 refuges. You have to declare, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dhamma, I take refuge in the Sangha. That is traditionally how you become a Buddhist. And many folks came to the shore of Plum Village and said, Thai, I want to plant my roots of spirituality here, but those 3 vows is becoming an obstacle to my root religion. And Thai said, oh, that's suffering. I will remove that. Because Thai had a deeper understanding, because if you practice the 5 mindfulness trainings, which are the foundation of mindfulness and ethics in our tradition, that embraces the 3 jewels, which is the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So cultivating the shore and building the shore sometimes I think is deeper. It's a deeper investment than the raft part. But we all need a raft. But once we've arrived at the shore, now how do we build it so that it becomes a foundation for us, a refuge for us, so that we can have a home to embrace and take care of our pain, suffering, and develop and cultivate our happiness and our joy, because suffering and joy are very important investments that we all have to make in order to build a culture and an understanding, and in the light of Plum Village teaching, that joy and happiness is not money, it is not success in wealth and in fame, but it is in the mindfulness that in this moment, I have eyes to see, I have a family to love, I have a community to be with. Oh, I can forgive my parents, my ancestors, because I am their continuation. I am renewing them in this moment. So the shore of Thai that he's built and developed, a home to continue to transform, reconcile, have new ways of seeing and new ways of being, to continue to bridge also the spiritual and the world. And we just say the world, but Thai say in the world, there's a lot of hidden spirituality. And we can now see in economics, looking with the eyes that Kate has explained, there's deep spirituality in it because there's care and love.
Beautiful, brother. And Kate, that brings me to, that ties what Brother Phap Huu just said, which is around, you talked about, when you were starting to write the book, and it felt quite lonely that you'd lost your community by leaving Oxfam. And now you've built a very big community, and the Action Lab is about building many, many communities. So I just wanted, in a sense, you to riff off what Phap Huu said in terms of how you see community and what you are building. And also, how do you... One of the things that I felt was so important about Ty was he never got caught in the fame trap. He was always stayed true, and that creates a lot of trust, obviously, that people can see Ty and say he is who he is. He's what he says is who he is what he says. So how do you, in a sense, I don't know if it's necessarily the right word, but protect yourself, just the word that comes up in my mind, protects you from fame, because, wherever you go, people come to you because they're looking to you for something, aren't they? They're looking for an answer. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for hope. And you have become a sort of lightning rod in the world of economics to a way we can regenerate communities and nations. So coming back, the importance of community and the communities you're helping to build, but also how do you not get caught in the trap of fame?
Lots of things.
That was the easy part of the question, by the way.
So much I want to say about community, and I want to bring it to the experience of being here as well. Where to begin? So Doughnut Economics is an idea. It's a book, some words on a page, and I drew on so much economic thinking that I'd never been taught. And that was the joy of writing the book, actually, drawing on Herman Daly, who founded ecological economics, and Nancy Folbre and Marilyn Waring, who founded feminist economics, and Janine Benyus by mimicry, and Donella Meadows systems thinking. So I was bringing together, and the names, you can hear the names, these are still from a Western mindset tradition, right? But these are from outside economics. But I was bringing these and celebrating the work of many, and making these ideas dance on the same page and calling it Doughnut Economics. But it comes out as a book. And the most thrilling thing that happened for me when the book came out in 2017 was that people would, you give a talk and you're doing a book signing, and people would say, not only could you sign the book, but could you sign the book? And I want to give it to my brother, or for myself or my mother, I want to give it to somebody because I want to put this into practice. I'm a teacher. I'm actually teaching this already in my class. I know it's not on the curriculum, but this is what the students should be learning. So I'm pushing the curriculum aside. Wow. Thank you to the teachers for that pioneering. And I'm a town councillor. Could we do this in our town? Like, what would it, can we try? I'm a mayor. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm setting up a company that's ethical clothing, or we're building a forest to sequester carbon. This is almost the logo of my company, but people getting excited and saying, I'm doing this. And I really feel, and this very much ties back to Plum Village, I really feel and often say that 21st century economics, the art of household management, 21st century economics will be practiced first and theorized later. Like, it's the practice that where it gets really, where we figure out how, often through experiment, but it's the practice. So I wrote a book, but actually it's the practitioners, the people who want to try it and do it, that turn ideas on a page into a reality. And it's messy and it's hard, especially when you're trying to bring out, this is a really nice metaphor. So let's go to a town. A town councillor or a mayor says, we want to do this here. Well, there's now over 90 towns, villages, cities, regions, districts, states around the world that have publicly said we are engaging with the concepts of doughnut economics to transform our locality. But that's really hard, because you're taking a town or a village and you're trying to orient it towards thriving, but you're in a region within a nation that has regulations, that are a country that's growth, and you're within the global capitalist system and the financial system that is extractivist and accumulative. And so you're trying to bring about transformation in this small place. And of course, you're going to hit the tensions, you're going to feel the challenge. It's not going to be fully possible because you're in an untransformed system, and yet you try. So it's so, I'm just now seeing how utterly like this it is. And yet you're never going to be able to transform your city alone. Of course you can't, because it's interbeing. It's part of everything. It's connected to global supply chains. It's regulated by the global financial system, by the national regulations. People come and go. And yet you try. And so I'm just so struck by the mayors and councillors and teachers and people working inside companies or community who say, and yet we rise and we will. And we're going to have a go. And the old system's not going to just roll over and say, please, go ahead, thrive. It's going to undermine, it's going to resist, it's going to mock, but we're going to do it anyway. So Doughnut Economics Action Lab works with people and organizations worldwide who, on finding out about these ideas, say, this looks like a really valuable tool for us. And it's a really important point for us that we never lobby. I've never once tried to convince anybody. There's no pushing, right? Not persuading, go on. No, people in a place utterly know their context and know what would be useful and know what would be possible and what they have energy and excitement to try. So it's those who say, I want to bring that here. And we've turned some of the ideas into, we call them tools. Like if you want to do a donut, downscale the donut for your city, there's a tool for doing that. It's in the commons. So it's online, it's free, it's available for anybody to download. We just ask for reciprocity. Please just share back what you learn or share back how you innovated. And it's quite a light framework, so you can adapt it. It's being used differently in Chile, in Stockholm. It's being used, wonderful different adaptations in China and in Mexico City. And we're all enriched and amazed by the brilliant things that people do and the ways they play with it. So that's what Doughnut Economics Action Lab is doing in the realm of schools and education. How can we introduce new teaching methods and ideas in towns and cities, in the world of business, in communities, in academia? That's the work we're doing. So, and that's a community. Although we also say, don't try to be the movement, join the movement. Again, back to the raft conversation, Joe, right? It's one of many boats. This is a flotilla. We don't want to say, it's this boat, you've got to be donut. There's a world of what's known as new economic thinking, and let's come back to that, of economy of the common good, the Wellbeing Alliance, so many different ways of thinking. These are just different portals, entry points, right? The raft is not the shore. There are many ways to get onto different rafts to head in the same direction. So let's not try to compete. And I'll often point people, actually, you think you're drawn to Doughnut Economics, but from what you're saying, actually, I think you want to do the economy for the common good. That will, or point them in different directions. And it's a real pleasure of seeing yourself as part of a much bigger ecosystem of change makers and saying, what is it that we are particularly contributing here? What role can we play in this bigger team? But can I bring community to here? So one of the chapters I wrote in Doughnut Economics is called Nurture Human Nature. And it starts with looking at the character of rational economic man that's taught in mainstream economics, as I was saying. It's the individual, it's the atomized individual. He's self-interested, he's got money in his hand, ego in his heart, calculator in his head, nature at his feet. He hates work. He loves luxury. Brother Phap Huu's laughing.
Sounds like you're describing me perfectly.
Yeah. And he knows the price of everything, and he can never get enough, right? And these are literally the traits that are written into equations that represent humanity in mainstream economic models. Insatiability, of course. There are unlimited wants. That is almost in the definition of what economics is. The management of scarce resources for unlimited wants. The self-interest. So the models we make of ourselves remake us. And economists, an economist called Robert Frank and his colleagues did research finding that students who go to university from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 of studying economics, the more they learn about rational economic man, the more they admire him. The more they value self-interest and competition over collaboration and altruism. I mean, if you want to succeed, you've got to, who's number one? Look out for number one. It's a dog eat dog world out there. Don't be the mug, right? All this stuff. So who we tell ourselves we are shapes who we become. And this is a critical insight, not just for economics, but for any discipline, indeed, any art, any belief system that tells us who we are. It remakes us. So when I come to Plum Village, and this is my second time coming here, I find the form of community, the way of living, and you could call it a social technology. It's a way of living together that we all encounter as we literally walk in with our rucksacks and where are we going to pitch our tent, and that kind of the bustle of day one, and the stillness of the monks and nuns, absolute stillness next to the kind of restless, rustling crowd. It's so wonderful. But we come with all our vulnerability. So I've come here with my whole family, which is my husband and my two children who are 15-year-old twins, and they're a girl and a boy. And so in a way, we're on a family holiday. But actually, because I've got a girl and a boy, they're staying in different hamlets. So my husband and my son are in one hamlet, and my daughter and I are in another. And because they're teenagers, they're on the teen program. And as we were coming on the train on the way here, I gradually realized, actually, my daughter will be off doing her own thing. I'll actually be myself on my own. And for me, that was actually, wow, I get to be Kate. And I get to I'm not here I'm not here at work. I'm not here as somebody's wife. I'm not, constantly checking in with my partner. I mean, we've switched our phones off, so we're off. I'm not checking in on my daughter all the time. I see her maybe twice a day, and she's really happy. So I'm Kate. And of course, what comes up is, well, who am I? I'm just Kate. Who am I? How will I be? Who will I be encountered as? And but also the loveliness of just having the space to see what happens. But I arrived on the first day, and I knew already two people who were here, but they were with their daughters, and I had this thing of, well, maybe I won't make any friends. And all the human vulnerability of, I'll just be alone. Well, it was fine. I'll sit on my own all week. I'll just eat my breakfast on my own all week and be fine. And I noticed that there was a moment at the end of the first day, I think it was, that we were called into the Dharma sharing family. So small groups of about 12 people that we will be together. We were sitting and eating together. We will be chopping vegetables together through the week. And I felt this deep human, when we stood in a circle and they said, this is your family. And they were all utter strangers, but the relief to belong. And so I really loved noticing that in myself. And then we went round and said each other's names, and we learned each other's names. And so I just noticed the deep, deep human need to belong and to be recognized. You're Kate. And that's all I wanted or needed. And so I love that coming here, because the way we live here when we're staying here is so utterly different from our other lives, that you step into a different kind of human relation, and you can really notice the vulnerabilities and the worries and the calm of meeting others. And then within the circle, so we share, we go around, and each person might speak for 3 minutes, whatever's arising in their heart at that moment. And the first time it might be a little bit awkward. What am I going to share? And then the second time, and then people start sharing very vulnerable things. As someone chokes up and can't speak, again, speech acts, right? They're saying something so simple. Somebody said, I'm my children are off, and I'm not here as mother or wife, and I feel like I'm here as a child, she said. And her voice choked. And that was all she shared. And that's everything. And she shared so much, and it was beautiful. But that vulnerability, when you hear someone's voice crack, and then everybody goes to another level of sharing, and then you feel deeply connected, and you chop vegetables together in silence, and you feel this great connection. And so I now feel I'm in a circle with people who I really, I will stay in touch with beyond here. I feel I'm really connected. And then the wonderful twist of it all is it's just random who I'm in a group with. And it could have happened with 12 of any of the 100 so people who are here. So it just makes me think about how humans we are so pro-social. We are the most social of all mammals. We desperately want community. And it's so, I want to say it's so easy to create, but it's so it's so beautifully held here. And the way it's done, it's learned over many years and held by somebody very thoughtful, a monk or a nun holding the circle. But it is easy because humans are so willing to be to connect, and it just makes me think we're just waiting to connect and to care across religion, across ethnicity, across. I'm English, and I met a wonderful Irish woman. We talked about the kind of English-Irish history, and we are firm friends now because we went and found a table together because our tables, we didn't have enough tables, and that bonded us. And so small acts of collaboration and listening and sharing, we want to connect. And I find that extraordinary, and asking myself, how can there be more opportunities in the world for people to do that rather than compete or conflict because of labels I hear about you or how I see you, what I think you must be. And then we the kind of the reptile in us rears up, and we are in fear, in defense. And so I find it extraordinary. This is my 4th day here, and I feel deeply at home and deeply connected to the people I'm with, and deeply and lightly. So I find that really fascinating, the ability to build community. And if I step back slightly and not economize it, but speak to it from the theories that I've drawn, Elinor Ostrom, a wonderful political scientist who recognized that in groups that thrive together, there are what she called these core design principles. There are principles. She studied so many groups and said there are principles that arise again and again, like a shared purpose, like agreed rules, there are not punishments, but there are consequences for breaking those rules, and those are graduated. The more you break the rule, at some point people might have to say you need to leave this community if you really don't share this. You need to step out. There's fast conflict resolution. There's self-governance. There's recognition of the governance by others. And when communities manage to put those rules in place, even if they haven't named those, she's naming it and listing it in one way, but other groups find it naturally. When those are in place, gosh, humans can thrive, and we can come out of ourselves and allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others. So it's just really fascinating to me how we do this. And of course, it's beautifully done when there are no phones. There's very little. There's wonderful food and sitting in circles, but it's so simple. So much of the complexity of other life is stripped away, and the humanness comes through, and we can experience it.
Thank you, Kate. We'll come back to the fame bit in a minute, but Brother, it feels important because what Kate named as those sort of, in a sense, principles of a healthy community seem to be reeling off Plum Village.
I know, I recognize a lot of the committees that Kate was naming. Like, we have the Dhamma teacher body, we have the teaching body, we have the caretaking council, we have the bhikshu. So all of these little circles that are in the bigger circle, which is a community, it does need to be put into place. And creating a community, when we say freedom, it doesn't mean you do whatever you want. Yeah. And I think a lot of people who, when they think of a joyful and free community, they think is a place where there's no rules. And actually, that will never be sustainable. And in the core of all Buddhist tradition, coming from the Buddhist time, we have the 6 harmonies, and it needs to be shared among it. And one of the harmonies is understanding that we're all practicing an ethics together. And for us as monastic, we have the precepts, the vinaya, the monastic codes of the monks and nuns. And all of us, we have to apply that. We have to practice that. That's what keeps all of us in harmony. That's what unites all of us. And then when you're in Plum Village, as a lay practitioners, we have the 5 mindfulness trainings that we, even if you haven't taken it, but in a way like you want to respect these rules because that is the essence of this community, such as we're all vegetarians here. We don't smoke and use alcohol here, and so on and so on. And these principles, they become guiding means to keep all of us supported and united. But also there is space for creativity. So one of the harmonies is also we practice the same Dharma. So in Plum Village, if you don't want to play the Plum Village game, which is like the 16 exercises of mindful breathing, the engagement of in these retreats, and you just want to sit alone, you got to find another community that 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 sees that that is part of their harmony. And another one is learning to speak with compassion. We can speak about the truth and about injustice and about things that are not right, but how do we share it? How do we speak it? That builds the community and builds understanding instead of targeting and judging each other and criticizing and putting each other down. So there are rules, sets of rules that are so important in our community. And I as an abbot have had to ask people to leave the community. And when we think of harmony, sometimes the compassion is not embracing all, but it's also seeing that there are some elements that we need to show that element another path because it is damaging the whole forest. Like when there's a tree that is in a lot of pain and that is rotting, and if we don't take care and remove that rot, it will rot to all the other trees. And it's is that in a way is also right mindfulness. That's right compassion. How do we take care of the community? And this takes a lot of practice of seeing the success and happiness and transformation of community beyond oneself, right? And I do this when I am. There were some monastics, they suffer so much as monks, and I just say you gotta disrobe. And I'm sharing this with a lot of love and understanding because the robe becomes your prison. You had an idea about monastic life, and it is just not in harmony with your energies. You're actually somebody that needs to be in a relationship. You need to love one person and know the boundary of that and not just feel like suppressed here. And then, because the suppression leaks all these other energies that they're suppressing. Maybe they're flirting with everybody, and they're just finding themselves draining their energy and draining other people's energy. And all of this, we do need, we call it the Sangha eye, and the Sangha eye needs the light, which is like our guidance, our insights, our precepts, our mindful manners also. We have one rule which is really unique is, monks and nuns, we fall in love with one another. When you share the same aspiration and you see that person so beautiful, so your love manifests. We all have love for one another, but when it surpasses a particular line, it becomes romantic. And it's very hard when you're in love to know that you're in love. So we have, our teacher have put out a policy. It's like, if four monks tells you that you're in love, you can't deny that you're in love. And the mentor has all the right to guide you and to say that you need to distance yourself from this person on days of practice, on community work day. You need to intentionally not be with that person. And because when you're in love, you're drunk in love. So you say, no, I'm not in love. That's brotherhood. That's siblinghood. That's sisterhood. But if four say, no, that is beyond siblinghood. And you have to really be very intentional. Our teacher has even sent monastics to different centers because they were so in love. So to distance themselves, so intentionally help them refocus their direction of practice and intention. So rules are very important, yes. So important.
And boundaries. I wanted to come back there actually because you began asking me, planetary boundaries. And I can say, well, planetary, why would we see it as bounded? But actually boundaries, I think, I often say boundaries unleash creativity. Or we could say boundaries can unleash freedom. Boundaries really matter. And actually when I drew the donut first, some colleagues of mine, way back in 2012, some colleagues of mine said, some American colleagues actually said, we Americans, we don't like boundaries. If we see a boundary, we want to shoot right through it. And I said, well, really? If you were holding a tiny baby and their temperature hit 40 degrees, would you say, you go, girl, you burst through that boundary? No. You would do everything you can, because when something is a living being, we know that life thrives within boundaries. Our bodies give us signals about boundaries all day, right? We're all probably lightly sweating now because today is going to become 40 degrees, and our bodies will sweat trying to cool themselves down, or we shiver when we try to warm up, or our stomachs will rumble if we're really hungry or we're thirsty. So we thrive within boundaries, and rules give us a freedom. And when those rules are shared and we know others are following those rules, it allows all of us to be free and to enjoy something and to come out and be truly ourselves and vulnerable and open, because there's a deep trust.
Yes, I just want to riff off this because sometimes people, they see us monastics, we have so many rules, and they're like, that's not freedom. But actually, it's thanks to the understanding of the boundaries. If I overstep this becomes suffering. So what is freedom? Is freedom from suffering. And so all of the monastic codes that we have, it helps us stay aligned with our deepest aspiration. And some ask, like, why are monastics not allowed to have romantic partners? Isn't that a suppression? Isn't that not a deep practice of true love? And I said, well, we gotta unpackage what love is, because I think in our 21st century we think of love as more in the line of desire and lust, and being able to have as many partners as possible is almost like a competition. And our teacher said, like, empty sex only creates more suffering and loneliness. And I said, well, as a monk, when I practice true love, I have the freedom because I'm not bound to just one person. My practice of love is to include as many as possible, as well as my love is to see that your happiness is my happiness. When you go through suffering, I just want to simply be there and listen to you. That is also love. And because I am not committed to just one person, there's a freedom there, where the freedom of no jealousy, because I don't belong to anybody. So when I am involved with all these friendships, and I have a limit to my love also. I have a limit to where I take my relationship to with each person. I have to have clarity as a monk. This is as far as I go. And I have boundaries. If you want to speak to me, I will, because I'm heterosexual, so I'm very aware of that. So when I'm with women and practitioners, I'm very aware of how I position myself. And that is the boundaries to protect our friendship, to protect our relationship. And that offers freedom, because then we don't overstep anything, which becomes suffering. So boundaries are so crucial. And Plum Village is still a community with harmonies, because we are practicing this. And we have elder brothers and sisters in the safeguarding team. We have the vinyas the precept we recite every 2 weeks to remind us of our path of practice. And like Kate shared from the beginning, there's a power to speaking it. The precept would be recited out loud, and we all have to listen to it. Even though I practiced for 22 years, I still do it every 2 weeks. This is a commitment, and to support a community, it is a continuous investment and a continuous growth. And I would say it's the same with any partnership, like a family. That is a community. There are boundaries that we also have to practice, and we also have to, maybe not the same precepts, but like, what is our commitment as a relationship, as a partner? What are the things that we want to recite, once every 2 weeks to remind ourselves of our commitment to each other? So I think there's so many elements of, I would dare say, in the monastery that we can take that raft reevaluated how to make it work in a family setting. And it can really offer a lot of clarity.
Beautiful, brother. And one of my brothers, like my siblings, was setting up a community, and he hit this problem that everyone involved wanted to create a community, but they wanted to create their community. And they thought that their idea of community was the right idea. And it all fell apart and he said, well, Plum Village is so lucky because it's got 2,600 years of sort of wisdom and knowing what works and building on it, but redefining it. And that allows the community to hold. There's a centrifugal force around which that community rolls. And without that, all you have is, as you said, Kate, the individualistic mind, which is so embedded in us, has a desire to take control. And it does.
Can I just share one thing I learned yesterday? I went to Lower Hamlet. It was lazy evening, and they do it every week for the children's. They do a soccer tournament. So it's the children versus the nuns and the parents. And I came because my childhood friends are here and their children are here, and I'm like their uncle. So I want to support them. And the beauty of community was so strong that what I was witnessing, especially among the children, because they were playing against the nuns and the parents, and they wanted to win. And what the beauty that I was recognizing, there was no superstar. Somehow the children, they united as the outcome is just scoring, and whoever scores, we celebrate. And definitely I can recognize a few kids that were more talented than the other. But when a goal was scored, you just see all of them celebrate together. And it was really like, it was a tribal energy, which was like, the outcome is the most important thing. And all of us are part of the means, and we're going to support in order to reach the goal, which is just to score. And one of the beauty was in one of the games, there's a child, I think it's his second time here. He's from Korea. And for whatever reason, he was the one that scored the 2 goals for the children. And they celebrated him. They even carried him. And he was having a deep moment of celebration. And he was walking out of the field as they finished the game. And I said, Thomas, you did so well. And he looked at me with actually some sadness. And he said, you know, brother, actually outside, I'm really bad at football. But in this moment, I'm being celebrated. And it was like he didn't know how to take this in. But what was so beautiful was how all of the other kids celebrated him and how he was being embraced. And it didn't matter if you're good or not, because you were the one that scored. And I just said, well, Thomas, breathe it in. You were there at the right time, at the right moment, and the ball just happened to be at your foot, and you scored. And he's like, brother, I love Plum Village. Oh. And so because I was watching myself, I didn't play. And what was so beautiful was the collective energy. And I was watching all of my emotions. And because I'm very competitive when it comes to sport. And I was recognizing myself, if I was in there, I would definitely not let the kids win. And at the same time, I was able to just watch the happiness as a collective. So real. This is not intellectual. This is right in front of my eyes, and I can feel it. And community is in us. It's so deeply ingrained in us.
So, Kate, coming back then to my question, my second part of my question. So, in a sense, you talked about when you got to the stage of not knowing if you could write the book, there was that sort of loneliness, the sense of not being part of community. Now you've created this vibrant, growing in a positive way, sort of enthusiastic community, which you have helped to lead. What has it given you personally to be part of that? But also, how do you manage the boundary of your emotions, to use that language of how you protect yourself, or just not, actually let's change that word, because it's not protect. How do you stay in balance so that you don't slip into the thing of, look what I've done, this is me, and that the mind that sort of thinks, look what I've done. So how does that work? How are you feeling nourished, supported by the community you've helped develop, and how do you stay within your own personal boundaries of recognizing it's like the football metaphor, that you were there and the ball landed at your feet and you've scored some goals, but it's not just you.
So the moment that the ball landed at my feet was back in 2010, when I came back to my job at Oxfam from having a year of maternity leave, 2 tiny twin babies. Global financial crisis had melted down the world, and the world's economists had said, we need to rewrite economics to reflect financial realities. And I remember sitting there with these knee-deep in the care economy, right? Raising twins, having worked 3 years in Zanzibar with the communities living dependent upon the forest, having worked at having immersed myself in everything but mainstream economics for a long time. Global supply chains, labor exploitation, human rights, barefoot entrepreneurs in Zanzibar, myself immersed in the care economy. So really immersed in the full values of life. And there's the world's economist when the Queen of England says, why didn't the economists see it coming? So they stumble over, we must rewrite economics to reflect financial realities. And I just thought, well, we'll be damned if we're only going to rewrite economics for that. I mean, the ecological breakdown of the world, the social and huge scales of inequality in the world. And we're only going to rewrite economics for that, so the stock market doesn't crash and the banks don't collapse. And I came back to work and somebody showed me, what's happened while I've been away. And someone said, well, there's this diagram of 9 planetary boundaries, round like a football. And I literally had a visceral reaction to seeing this diagram, which was a circle with these radiant overshoots of some of the planetary boundaries. And I thought, this is the beginning of 21st century economics. So somebody had done a wonderful pass to me of this. And I thought, well, if there are outer limits beyond which we shouldn't go, surely there are inner limits of every human's need. Real need, not that greed and consumption, but the deep need of having enough food. And so I drew a circle within a circle, and that became the donut. So just as you threw that metaphor to me, Jo, just like a football, that's what comes to my mind the moment somebody passed me the ball. And totally aware that I was building on generations of work. In fact, it was only after I'd drawn that, literally, people said to me, do you know, back in 1974, a British economist called Barbara Ward had said, literally, there are outer limits and inner limits. She had spoken the donut, but she hadn't drawn it. So it's that amazing feeling of drawing on something that was in the ether that I never read, but the ideas are there, and I literally drew them with a pen. So huge awareness that you're drawing on many people's work that you may no longer be aware of where it came from. Many, many people helped you line up that goal. And then I wrote it as a book. So how did you phrase it? What you did. I wrote a book. And again, it was drawing on, and by the way, as you well know, I nearly fell out of that, right? I really nearly didn't write a book. And thanks to people who saw me and spoke with me and helped me, I held it together and did. And celebrated naming many of the places of the ideas that I was aware of where they come from, the ones I could name. So I wrote a book. That's what I did. But then the thrill is what people do with it and put it into practice. And so the organization that I co-founded, and it was really important to me to co-found it, not to, I find it funny when you see I'm president and CEO. It's like, whoa, I have made myself king. It's like, that's a weird thing to do. So I co-founded Doughnut Economics Action Lab, and the name is really important. I never wanted to found an institute. It's just too heavy. I actually never wanted to set up an organization. I love ideas. So it was a responsibility to create an organization that I felt I should do. But it being an action lab, only when I came across that idea, I thought, oh, I can do this. It's all about action, right? It's all about practice. Practice first, theorize later. So let's see what happens when people try to put these ideas into practice. I mean, it's fine to write grand ideas on the page of a book, but actually, how do you try and introduce systems thinking into the way your council runs, or create a regenerative enterprise that gives more back to the living world than it takes, and still make enough revenue to keep the business going? I mean, these are really not easy to do. So the easy bit is to write the ideas down on the page. What if we did? I have huge admiration for people that I think of them as kind of pioneering change makers who say, I'm going to do this, even though I know we'll run into the limits. So the Action Lab, and it's a lab because it's all about experimentation. We don't know what will happen. We don't know where it will take off and where it'll start, but then maybe fizzle out. And of course, that'll happen. And also, I don't know how long the organization lasts for. We're not trying to create something that lasts forever for its own sake. It pops up and it'll pop down at some point. It'll have been a useful innovation, and it'll let go and something else will happen. So Doughnut Economics Action Lab, I thought, oh yeah, I could do that. And so it's just about the practice. It's about working with people who are putting these ideas into practice. And I get a thrill when I point to the work of others. So we have a team now of 15 of us. When somebody says, I really want to talk to you, Kate, about business, I say, oh, actually, you really want to talk to my wonderful colleague, Erinch, because he's leading that work. I want to do this in my city. You want to talk to Leonora. She knows so much more about how to put this into practice and what's happening in towns and cities. I mean, so it's not me. It's others in the team. Or actually, you don't want to talk to anyone in our team. Talk to the deputy mayor of Grenoble, because they're doing amazing things in Grenoble. And sometimes when people invite me to do a keynote speech, if it's in a place where there's any practice happening, I say, actually, can we make this a co-note? Like, I don't want to be this pinnacle. Keynote. Can we have a co-note? I'll talk about the ideas, but really then let me invite in somebody who's doing it here where you are. And then if you're interested, you could connect with them, but they can speak of practice of which I can't at all because I'm not doing that practice. I haven't set up a company around this. I mean, I've set up an organization, but I'm not a mayor or councillor, and I'm not teaching in high schools. So I'm not the expert. I don't know. And I love that it's this community of people who we're setting up peer learning groups as well. So if you want to learn how to set up a small community organization, learn from other community organizations who've done it. And the power of peer-to-peer inspiration has been massive for us. Thinking about how you can enable ideas to spread and scale at the speed that these times require, right? So we put them all in the commons. And I need to say, we are funded by foundations, right? That's what makes it possible. So we don't have market-based relationships. And that makes it possible for us to say everything we create is in the commons. You can use it and adapt it and just share back. But peer-to-peer learning, and it happened when I noticed, I could go on podcasts or give a TEDx talk or something and say, what if a city did this? But it was when the vice mayor of Amsterdam said, well, we're going to put the donut at the heart of our circularity policy. I mean, that's just a whole different speaking, because other cities say, wait, what? It's when we see somebody who's like ourselves, also a mayor or a sustainability leader or a teacher. It's like ourselves, but they're doing that thing that we thought was impossible, but there they are, they're doing it. That is massive inspiration. Go talk to them, learn from them how they persuaded their colleagues, how they adopted the idea, how they're getting started, and then do your own version. So one of the chapters of the book is how to be distributive by design. And this spreading of the idea is literally distributive by design. The expertise and the learning is everywhere. So it's not with me at all.
So, Brother Phap Huu, one of the reasons I'm enjoying this conversation so much is because the flow between what Kate's saying and Plum Village practices is so sort of sweet, because Kate answered the question without directly answering the question. So
She's practicing no self.
yeah, exactly. So what she's expressing is humility. It's not me looking at ancestors. So all that she's just coming together and holding the baton for a while and then passing it on. Not being attached to it being the way and the only way. Appreciating impermanence, which is that this is helpful at the moment and at some point it may not be helpful. And also generosity, which is I'm sharing this openly, and that I trust that other people, what they're doing, are re-inspiring me, that there's a circular flow of energy. So that sounds very Plum Village to me.
That speaks on, we call this virtue. There's virtue in the insight, and there's virtue in the actions, and there's trust. And sometimes they don't know Kate, but they read the book, they see the understanding, and then they see also, I believe when you're practicing this, you're also expressing the generosity for people to be a part of the mission in their way. And there's one time I was sitting with Tai in this hut, and it was in the summer retreat, and Tai say, Phap Huu, there's one thing we can always trust, is that the people that are coming to Plum Village are people that has the aspiration to bring love and understanding into their life. Because that's what we're representing. And what we're representing is very real. But if it's fake, then it will attract fake people. So, and Tai then said, and for the community, this is very important. If there is still understanding, there is still siblinghood, there is still a real practice in the community, then we are authentic. And the moment we are fake, Tai said, close the doors, no retreats, and you have to rebuild. You have to always come back to our essence and make sure that what we are teaching and sharing, we are walking it. And even if we're not perfect, we're going in that direction. Because then it is more than just the theories, it's more than just the notions. It becomes alive in us. And I do believe that when you come to a Plum Village retreat, it's more than just the Dhamma talks, right? That's what I got when I was a kid and I came here, is what I was experiencing in the community. What I'm experiencing is something very real. These are people that are putting it into practice. These are folks who are really transforming themselves in order to transform the world. And actions and words, when they go together, they become virtues. And I think the virtue is also something that gets transmitted in also aspiration. Just like Tai he's not here anymore with us, but his virtue is still very alive. And that is something that is action beyond times, because it is not just limited to just him as a human being, but the insights and the transformation that he was able to show in his life has penetrated into the collective consciousness, and is being now cultivated by all of us, and will be its own flower and plants in its own right. And so therefore, as leaders and as those who create something that has the power to shift, the power to change, the insight as go as a river. I think this is what, Kate, you spoke on. It's like you see yourself as a drop of the water. And sometimes your drop has a big impact. It helps push forward. But then sometimes the water also needs the support of the community to keep going. So Tai says the reflection of the river is very beautiful because it's going in one direction. But who do you think is pushing it? And at the essence, it's just the water pushing it. And who is the water? It's all of us. And sometimes we are that big drop of water that comes in and just gives a big splash, and helps move. But then if that drop of water thinks it is more superior, then it doesn't touch interbeing because the essence of it is just water. And that gives the freedom and that gives the practice of humility and the practice of community. One of the things that I've watched Tai throughout his life, where I really felt Tai never got caught in the limelight, was how he scheduled his way of life to always have elements of community. He would give a Dhamma talk, and he would be the one leading the walking meditation. And then he would just sit with everybody to have a meal. So the way you position yourself practically in life also helps remind you of the greater river that you're a part of. And I think I've shared this. I've shared this story in different podcasts, but it was really a moment where I saw Tai put it into practice. As an attendant, sometimes
this is my favorite story.
Yeah, I shared it in the climate retreat.
I
right?
love this story.
It's like, as an attendant, I feel like I have to protect him and clear the path for him. And there was a day in the hall where everybody was huddled around the door to get out, and Tai was walking there. And I felt like I needed to, clear the path for Tai because Tai is the superstar. Everybody needs to step aside. And as I, with a lot of enthusiasm, was moving forward, I just felt this yank on my robe. And I looked back and it was Tai yanking me back. And without saying anything, Tai just gave me the hand motion, don't do anything. And as Tai was walking towards the door, just naturally, organically, the people step aside and allow Tai to come to the door, put on his shoes, and to walk out and to go to his hut. And Tai didn't say anything, and I was in deep shame. I was just like, oh my goodness, how can I be so unmindful and not understand Tai? And then when we arrived here at this door, before entering to this kitchen, Tai just looked at me and he said, Phap Huu, when Tai's in the community, Tai just wants to be seen as a member of the community. You don't need to do anything to make me special. You need to practice also to see me and you as part of this community. And just in that action was a lot of wisdom because Tai didn't teach me this and scold me in front of everyone. Tai knew that I was also feeling humiliated and maybe some shame and my inferiority was coming. And Tai waited when it was just me and him at his hut and very skillfully just said, Phap Huu, when we're in the community, we're one with the community. You don't need to do anything to make Tai feel special. And I still carry that teaching today as now as a teacher, as now as one of the members to help lead. Or when we do this podcast, meeting people saying, brother, it is the podcast that has brought me to Plum Village. And I just celebrated and I said, welcome to the river. Thank you for coming. And I, in that moment, really have to intentionally also practice sharing this merit, sharing this gratitude, sharing this joy, or sharing sometimes maybe the idea of success came out, which is like, yes, the podcast is successful. We're bringing people to Plum Village. But then to generate it and to channel it to, all of our wisdom that we're speaking, it's not ours alone. It is through so many generations. And then we have this opportunity, the ball is in our hands and we're just sharing it and then passing it to so many other people so that the game of insight continues to be played.
Beautiful.
Can I pick up? So when you said, Tai is the superstar, sometimes people introduce me that way, rock star economist. I mean, and if I said, oh, Brother Phap Huu, he's a rock star monk, for me, it doesn't feel good at all. I know people are trying to be fun, but they're trying to honor you or recognize you, or it doesn't feel good at all. Like literally, again, it's all metaphors. A rock star is on a stage quite far away. They are literally untouchable. They are playing out at the masses. And I just think, I don't like it at all. I find it really distancing. So you said, let's talk about fame. I mean, I'm not famous, right? I'm really privileged I really am glad I can, at most places, I'm just a middle-aged woman. If I go into conferences on sustainability, then people are much more likely to recognize me, and I experience what it must be like to be recognized. And I'm really aware of how hard that must be for people who are recognized all the time. And I think so. I did a TED Talk in 2018, and I'm so glad that I did it, because it's been so valuable in sharing the ideas and in generating invitations from unexpected places. And I can think to myself, well, hang on, you've heard, right? If I don't know, the IMF asked me to write something, or the World Bank, and I thought, what? This is so different, but. You've seen my TED Talk, so you know what I'm going to say. So it gives me the feeling of I'm going to say what I'm going to say. There's no surprises here, right? So there's a huge value of having it out there. But it also means that your face is there. You doing this podcast, your face and videos, right? And you're known. And so I experienced that thing that happens when you're at a conference or something and somebody sees me, and I know they've seen my face in this digital world where you are on a stage and it's lit and there's I can see it happening in people's faces. Or they literally will sometimes come up and say, oh my God, sorry, I'm having a real fangirl moment and I can't believe I'm talking to you. And so I find it very I don't mind, but I find it very, very distancing, because I just want to say, look, I'm just a really ordinary person. I'm a little sister in my family. I don't know. I'm searching, and please don't be distant. Or even actually when we were here at Plum Village last year, there's about 100 people, and you don't get to meet everybody. And a couple of younger women came up to me at the end, or I was in conversation, and they said, well, I know who you are, but I was never going to come up and say anything. And again, so being known can be very distancing. People think, well, I can't possibly talk to you, or I'm not going to show that I know. And it puts huge distance that I regret. Gosh, there were people who I would have loved to meet who didn't come and talk to me because they think they know who I am, because they saw me in a video. And yet I do the same to others. Right? Janine Benyus, who is a wonderful thinker on biomimicry. I watched a video of her talking, and when I got to meet her, I was like, sorry, I can't believe I can't believe And look, I'll be honest, when I come here, I see, oh, there's Brother Phap Huu. And I had that when I saw you yesterday. And then when you came and sat down, oh my God, I'm saying to my daughter, oh my God. And so it's a very human thing. We are looking for people who inspire us or lead us. We're all searching for somewhere to learn from. And I never came here when Ty was here and live. I didn't know of his work in great depth. I think I heard of it through you, Jo, right? And you were beginning to do some discussions with him. But I'm looking at a picture hanging of him on the wall right here. His presence is very strong here. But I also, as somebody who's newer to Plum Village, I also like that I'm coming here and his presence is here and the stories of him are here, but I'm encountering this next generation of Plum Village, which is yourselves and all of the monks and the nuns and the whole community, because the raft is not the shore and the person is not the whole philosophy. They inhabit it, and we can become very attached and deeply love individual people who open its possibility to us. But it's also wonderful to encounter something that they've created, all the ripples, but the drop is no longer visible. So I really like coming here and being in a place where there's the next generation of the community is emerging, and it's still strong. And I think of that in myself in relation to Doughnut Economics. And when I was very originally having the idea back in 2018, should I create an organization? I talked with a friend and I said, but would I ever be able to step away? And she said, well, you'd have to be able to, otherwise, if the idea can't survive without you, well, then it doesn't work. And I really like that thought. So how do you put it out there? How do you allow the idea to thrive because it works with everybody who works with it? And I think that's such a valuable way to think and separate yourself from it, but also be generous when, because I do, as I say, fangirl. I get thrilled when I meet some people and I get all that effect. Oh, it's them. My God, I can't believe I'm standing in front of you. So I accept it when it happens to me. And it's really lovely to say, and they say, I'm really sorry. Could you sign my book on it? Or could we take a photo? I'm like, oh, of course. Yes, because I've done that to others and I understand it. And we want to celebrate that connection. But to remember that one of the reasons we feel that, so, okay, someone may have written a book that really distilled things, but I was just distilling things that I'd drawn from others. It's a little nodal point and it keeps moving on. I'm just coming back because we've been talking here this week a lot about the power of the digital addiction, right? But also the digital projection. When you see someone in a TED Talk or in a podcast and they become a name, they become a thing, it can be very distancing. And I think it's really generous to each other to make sure that we don't introduce each other or hold each other in a way that is super distancing. So I love that story that you tell of Ty tugging you back. and I remember when you told it when I was here last time, he said, the community knows my role in the community. So the community, the water also knows how to move when I want to return to my heart. And that's so beautiful. There's distributed responsibility and a distributed understanding of what we should do next. And this concept of go like a river. I love it when we're on the walking meditation. So walking very intentionally, where I'm staying in New Hamlet, up a hill, sit at the top and then come back down. And as you're going up the hill and there's lots of people and kids and feet just in front of you and there's something of a traffic jam that wants to kick in. Oh, I'll just whip round. I'll just go this way around. And no, I am a drop in a river and we're going together and there's no hurry and nowhere to get to. And it's such a lovely... Back to human nature. Which part of our nature do we want to nurture? I want to nurture the flow in the river. When I'm chopping vegetables in the kitchen and I finish the part of the task I'm doing and you see some things that need sweeping off the floor. Nobody told me to sweep the floor, but I'm not going to wait to be told. It's like, as a river, that needs to be swept. Oh, I'll do that bit. And that lovely distributed responsibility of a system that has a shared purpose, a community. We know what we're doing together and it's not the bumping and pushing of elbows. It's the flowing. And it's so lovely to inhabit that.
So I'm very aware of time because we could actually sit here all day and talk about... I have one last question and then we will close, which is, have there been any experiences or anything you've learned in Plum Village last time and here that you feel can help enliven your practice, either personally or in the world, as you go out? Because what it feels like is that a lot of what you're experiencing is, in a sense, like a tuning fork. That what you resonate to, you feel yourself resonating to here. You know, that Plum Village and the way you see the world, the way Plum Village and Thai saw the world have a lot in common. There's a if you were to have a sort of circles, you know, there would be a lot of centre ground. But is there anything new you've learned, or anything that's developed in you, or any insights that you feel would support your own personal or your practice in the Action Labs going forward?
Can I step it back from the Action Labs, because that's a whole other jump. I really love the practice of seeing the world in your plate. I love the word that stands for the concept of interbeing. It's just, it's the for me, the summation of a worldview that I love finding myself moving into. I was raised in a very loving, wonderful home without active religion. So I was raised, I could only say I was raised with a very tacit, passive kind of Christian background, right? There's Easter, there's Christmas. I've never really got into it because I didn't believe in the religion behind it, and it just felt incredibly consumerist to me. So it was like consumerism that I was required to be part of because it's Christmas, come on! And I love coming to a place that has a practice that I really appreciated what you said, Brother Phap Huu, about the 5 mindfulness trainings that, and I didn't know that TWOII intentionally removed, say, I
take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha. That would be a too strong a step for me. Say, I don't know. Maybe one day I will. I have no idea, but not now. But I really love these practices of choosing how to live. And when I read them last time, I said, absolutely, I really want to take on these 5 trainings. And I loved being part of that ceremony. And it was really moving to me because it was the first time I'd voluntarily, I don't go into churches and pray, and it's quite alien to me. But to come somewhere that invited me to be part of a ceremony that I had read what it was I was committing to and affirming, I was like, yes. It was beautiful. And of course, it's beautiful to do that in community and to be surrounded by the brothers and sisters sending their very strong support to us as we did it. I love that. So, the world in your plate and interbeing, the sense of community and the marvelous way that community is created here. I'm just fascinated by what it is in us as humans that is so willing to connect when the conditions are right, and supportive and allow us to be vulnerable and open, but it's in a trusting space. And what we'll then do for each other and the rules that we are then willing to live by because of other freedoms that come up. I really want to think about how do you bring that, as I was saying, how do you do Doughnut Economics in a city? You can say in our committee, but then we've got to take it out. How do you take the practices from here that work so beautifully because others are committed to them here? How do you live by them when you're surrounded by others who don't share them or haven't heard them or actually fight back against them? Or how do you do that? I don't yet know how I will take that back out. But I love the intentionality. I love the noble silence, just the less talking. I find it incredibly easy. I've found it so delightful to turn off my phone for the week and put it away and just be in the present moment. And so when in one of the Dharma sharings, somebody was talking about, not scrolling with family. My 3 family members leaned forward and looked at me at that moment because I'm often on WhatsApp because I love connecting with people. But it's made me think, right, actually, maybe, oh gosh, I'm saying on the podcast, this is a bit of a commitment.
You can stop.
Maybe not to have my phone in the kitchen, which is where we hang out together in the evening. Just not have it in the kitchen. And be more present with my family. So really, at a personal level of just being more attentive to that.
You have spoken those words.
That's
I love what you said. I'll try. I might.
No, I think that's a beautiful boundary, though.
So, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. I was talking to your 15-year-old son, Cass, just for a little while just before you came to join. And he's obviously a very sensitive and deep-thinking young man. And I said to him, when he told me he was 15, I said, well, when I was 15, I was trying to rearrange my stamp collection and trying to work out whether the trains should go with the flowers or the countries should be on their own. And I said, what do you put this down to that you're at 15 so so thoughtful about the world. He said, I've got good parents.
Wow.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, Cass.
Oh.
So thank you.
Thank you. And his sister, I want to say, he has a sister who is also here in Plum Village, and is, there's a beautiful calligraphy that says, I am in love with Mother Earth. She's so in love with Mother Earth, and it's so beautiful to bring my children here and see them each in their own way connecting with different parts of the practice, and just so loving the opportunity to be here. It's a really beautiful experience as a parent, as a family, to have that happen.
What greater joy. So thank you, Brother Phap Huu. Thank you also. For me, this has been very enlivening and joyful and deep. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, dear listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, and how could you not, there are many, many more, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, all platforms that carry podcasts. If you want others to follow your trail to us, then if you feel the wish, then please also leave a review so that other people can go. And you can leave any review. It doesn't have to be all positive. It's also good to have your suggestions of how we can improve. So thank you.
And you can also find all previous guided meditation in the on-the-go section of the Plum Village app. This podcast is co-produced with Global Optimism and the Plum Village app, with support from the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation. If you feel inspired to support the podcast moving forward, please visit www.tnhf.org/donate. And we would like to offer our gratitude to our friends Kata, Clay, our co-producers, Joe, our other Joe, our audio editing, Anka, our show notes and publishing, Jasmine and Cindy, our social media guardian angels, and Georgine, our sound engineer today. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
The way out is in.